Imagine a book so controversial, so filled with forbidden knowledge that early church leaders banned it from the Bible entirely. A text that reveals the names of fallen angels, describes otherworldly journeys through heaven and hell, and contains prophecies that some claim predict the end times with startling accuracy. This is the Book of Enoch, a mysterious ancient manuscript that was hidden away for over 1,000 years, only to resurface in the 18th century and shake the foundations of biblical scholarship. Tonight we're diving deep into the shadows of religious history to uncover why this extraordinary text was censored, what secrets it contains, and why some scholars believe it holds keys to understanding the supernatural world that mainstream Christianity doesn't want you to know about. Prepare yourself for a journey into the forbidden realms of ancient wisdom. The Book of Enoch isn't just another ancient text. It's a literary time bomb that has been ticking for millennia. To understand why it was censored, we first need to understand what makes it so extraordinary. According to biblical genealogy, Enoch was the great-grandfather of Noah, described in Genesis as a man who walked with God and was taken up to heaven without experiencing death. But while the Bible gives us only a few verses about this enigmatic figure, the Book of Enoch explodes this brief mention into a sprawling 108-chapter epic that reads like ancient science fiction meets divine revelation. The text we know today actually consists of 5 separate books, written by different authors across several centuries, roughly between 300 BC and 100 AD. These include the Book of the Watchers, the Book of Parables, the Astronomical Book, the Dream Visions, and the Epistle of Enoch. Each section offers increasingly detailed accounts of Enoch's supernatural experiences and divine revelations. What makes this text truly remarkable is its vivid, almost cinematic descriptions of otherworldly realms. Enoch doesn't just claim to have spoken with God. He provides detailed accounts of traveling through multiple levels of heaven, witnessing the throne room of the Almighty, and receiving cosmic secrets about the structure of the universe, the movements of celestial bodies, and the ultimate fate of humanity. But perhaps most controversially, the Book of Enoch provides the most detailed account in ancient literature of the fallen angels, known as the Watchers. These supernatural beings, according to Enoch, descended from heaven and not only corrupted humanity but taught them forbidden knowledge, everything from metallurgy and cosmetics to astrology and weapons of war. The text names specific angels and describes their rebellion in graphic detail. It tells of how these beings took human wives, producing a race of giants called the Nephilim, and how their corruption became so great that God decided to cleanse the earth through the Great Flood. This narrative provides backstory and context to brief mentions in Genesis that have puzzled scholars for centuries. Archaeological evidence suggests that the Book of Enoch was incredibly influential in ancient Jewish and early Christian communities. Fragments of the text were found among the Dead Sea Scrolls, indicating it was studied and revered by the Essene community. Early church fathers like Tertullian and Clement of Alexandria quoted from it extensively, treating it as divinely inspired scripture. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church, one of the oldest Christian denominations in the world, still includes the Book of Enoch in their biblical canon today, the only major Christian church to do so. This preservation by the Ethiopian Church is actually how the complete text survived the centuries of suppression in other Christian traditions. But if this text was so revered in ancient times, what changed? Why did the book that was once considered sacred scripture become forbidden knowledge? The answer lies in the shifting power structures of early Christianity and the deliberate decisions made by church leaders who saw Enoch's revelations as dangerously destabilizing. The systematic suppression of the Book of Enoch wasn't an accident. It was a calculated campaign by early church authorities who recognized the text is potential to undermine their emerging theological framework. To understand this censorship, we need to examine the political and religious climate of the first few centuries after Christ. During the 2nd and 3rd centuries AD, Christianity was evolving from a diverse collection of beliefs into a more standardized religion. Church leaders were working to establish orthodoxy, a single unified interpretation of Christian doctrine that could be enforced across all communities. The Book of Enoch presented several problems for this consolidation effort. First, Enoch's detailed angelology, his systematic description of angelic hierarchies and their interactions with humanity, contradicted the simpler angelic theology that church leaders preferred. The text's graphic descriptions of fallen angels and their ongoing influence on earth suggested a spiritual warfare model that made many bishops uncomfortable. They preferred a cleaner narrative where evil was more abstract and less personalized. Second, Enoch's cosmic journey narratives encouraged a form of mysticism that church authorities saw as dangerous. If individuals could have direct revelations from God, as Enoch claimed to have experienced, this undermined the authority of church hierarchy. Why need bishops and priests if believers could access divine knowledge directly? The theological implications were even more troubling. Enoch's text suggested that corruption entered the world not through Adam and Eve's disobedience, but through the rebellion of the Watchers. This alternative origin story for human evil complicated the emerging doctrine of original sin that would become central to Christian theology. Perhaps most significantly, the Book of Enoch contained detailed prophecies about the end times that didn't align with the more general apocalyptic visions found in the canonical Book of Revelation. Enoch's specific predictions and timelines could be used to challenge church teachings about the second coming and final judgment. The turning point came during the 4th century, particularly around the Council of Laodicea in 364 AD, where church leaders began formally defining which books would be considered canonical scripture. The Book of Enoch, despite its ancient pedigree and widespread use, was deliberately excluded from the official biblical canon. Church fathers like Jerome and Augustine wrote extensively against including Enochic literature in scripture. Jerome argued that the book's fantastic claims about Enoch's heavenly journeys were too extraordinary to be credible. Augustine was more direct, suggesting that such detailed revelations about angelic hierarchies were unnecessary and potentially misleading for ordinary believers. The suppression was remarkably effective. As the Roman Empire officially embraced Christianity and church authority became institutionalized, copies of the Book of Enoch began disappearing from libraries and scriptoriums across Europe and the Mediterranean. The text survived primarily in Ethiopia, where the church maintained its independence from Roman theological influence. By the medieval period, most Christian scholars in Europe knew of the Book of Enoch only through brief quotations in earlier works. The complete text had effectively vanished from Western Christianity. This censorship campaign was so successful that for over 1,000 years, the Book of Enoch existed only in fragments and references. But ancient secrets have a way of resurfacing, and the story of how this forbidden text returned to light reads like an archaeological thriller. The rediscovery of the complete Book of Enoch in the 18th century sent shockwaves through biblical scholarship and raised uncomfortable questions that religious authorities had hoped were buried forever. But what exactly does this forbidden text reveal that made it so dangerous to early church leaders? The most explosive content in the Book of Enoch is undoubtedly its detailed account of the fallen angels, known as the Watchers. Unlike the brief mentions in Genesis, Enoch provides names, ranks, and specific descriptions of these supernatural beings. The text identifies 200 angels who descended to Mount Hermon and made a pact to take human wives, directly violating divine law. Enoch names the leaders of this rebellion: Semjaza, who led the conspiracy; Azazel, who taught humans the arts of war and seduction; Barakel, who taught astrology; Kokabel, who revealed the secrets of astronomy; and dozens of others, each associated with different forms of forbidden knowledge. This isn't mythology. Enoch presents these as historical facts, with specific locations and detailed consequences. The text describes how these angels taught humanity technologies and practices that were meant to remain divine secrets. Azazel taught men to make swords, knives, shields, and armor, introducing warfare to a previously peaceful world. Other angels taught women cosmetics and jewelry making, while still others revealed the secrets of spell casting, root cutting, and the observation of celestial bodies for divination purposes. Perhaps most disturbing to ancient readers was Enoch's description of the Nephilim, the giant offspring of these angel-human unions. The text describes these beings as enormous, violent creatures who consumed everything humans could produce and then began devouring humanity itself. Their corruption became so complete that they began eating each other, turning the earth into a realm of cannibalistic chaos. But Enoch's revelations go far beyond the fallen angel narrative. The text provides detailed descriptions of Enoch's journey through multiple levels of heaven, offering cosmic geography that rivals any modern science fiction. He describes the movements of celestial bodies, the nature of divine justice, and the ultimate fate awaiting both the righteous and the wicked. One of the most fascinating aspects of the Book of Enoch is its astronomical sections, which demonstrate sophisticated knowledge of celestial mechanics. Enoch provides detailed calendars, describes the movements of stars and planets, and offers calculations that some modern researchers argue show remarkable accuracy for an ancient text. The prophetic sections of Enoch are equally remarkable. The text contains detailed predictions about the Messiah that early Christians found remarkably aligned with Jesus' ministry. It describes a figure called the Son of Man, who will judge the earth and establish God's kingdom, language that appears throughout the New Testament. Perhaps most intriguingly, Enoch claims to have received a complete vision of human history from creation to the final judgment. His Dream Visions section provides an allegorical account of biblical history that extends far beyond what was recorded in other ancient texts, including predictions about the temple's destruction and the dispersion of Israel that proved remarkably accurate. These revelations help explain why church leaders found the Book of Enoch so threatening. But the story becomes even more fascinating when we examine how this forbidden knowledge has influenced religious thought throughout history, often in ways that mainstream Christianity refuses to acknowledge. Despite official suppression, the Book of Enoch's influence on religious thought never completely disappeared. Like water finding cracks in stone, Enochic ideas seeped through the foundations of Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, shaping mystical traditions and esoteric knowledge that authorities couldn't entirely control. The most obvious influence is found throughout the New Testament itself. The Book of Jude explicitly quotes from Enoch, referencing the prophecy about God coming with 10,000s of his holy ones to execute judgment. But the connections run much deeper than direct quotations. Jesus' favorite self-designation, Son of Man, appears over 80 times in the Gospels and is a central concept in the Enochic literature. The detailed descriptions of final judgment, resurrection of the dead, and the nature of the afterlife that appear throughout the New Testament all have striking parallels in the Book of Enoch that predate the Christian era by centuries. The influence extends into early Christian mysticism and Gnosticism. Many Gnostic texts contain Enochic themes about hidden knowledge, angelic hierarchies, and the cosmic battle between light and darkness. The idea that secret wisdom was transmitted from heaven to select individuals, a central Gnostic concept, mirrors Enoch's claims about receiving divine revelations. In Jewish tradition, despite official rabbinical disapproval, Enochic ideas profoundly influenced mystical Judaism, particularly the development of Kabbalah. The detailed descriptions of heavenly palaces, angelic names, and cosmic structure found in Kabbalistic literature bear unmistakable resemblances to the visions described in the Book of Enoch. Islamic tradition also preserves Enochic elements, particularly in the figure of Idris, who many scholars identify with Enoch. The Quran's brief mentions of Idris being raised to a high place echo Enochic themes, and later Islamic mystical literature developed elaborate accounts of heavenly journeys that parallel Enoch's cosmic travels. During the medieval period, when the complete text was unavailable in Europe, Enochic ideas survived in fragmentary form through various channels. Alchemical traditions preserved angel names and magical formulae derived from Enochic sources. The elaborate angelologies found in medieval grimoires and magical texts often trace back to the systematic cataloging of angelic hierarchies first found in the Book of Enoch. The Renaissance saw a renewed interest in ancient wisdom traditions, and scholars like Johannes Reuchlin and Giovanni Pico della Mirandola incorporated Enochic concepts into their Christian Kabbalah. The idea that ancient patriarchs had received divine revelations about cosmic secrets became central to Renaissance magic and natural philosophy. Even the Protestant Reformation couldn't entirely escape Enochic influence. Some radical Protestant groups embraced the idea of direct divine revelation, arguing that the canon of Scripture wasn't closed, and that God could still communicate through visions and prophecies similar to those described in Enoch. The influence became particularly pronounced in English occultism. John Dee, Queen Elizabeth I's court mathematician and advisor, claimed to have received direct communications from angels using a system he called Enochian magic. His detailed records of angelic conversations, preserved in the British Library, read like updates to the ancient Book of Enoch. But these scattered influences and hidden traditions were nothing compared to the earthquake that occurred when the complete Book of Enoch finally returned to Western scholarship. The implications of this rediscovery would challenge everything religious authorities thought they had settled centuries earlier. In 1773, Scottish explorer James Bruce returned from Ethiopia with 3 complete copies of the Book of Enoch, marking the beginning of a new chapter in biblical scholarship that continues to send ripples through religious communities today. The impact of this rediscovery cannot be overstated. It was like finding a missing piece of a puzzle that suddenly made sense of thousands of scattered fragments. The first English translation, published by Richard Lawrence in 1821, immediately sparked controversy in academic and religious circles. Here was a text that early church fathers had quoted extensively, that was clearly influential in New Testament writings, yet had been deliberately excluded from the biblical canon. The implications were staggering. Modern scholarship has revealed just how extensive Enoch's influence on biblical literature really was. Computer analysis of linguistic patterns shows clear connections between Enochic literature and numerous biblical texts. The Book of Daniel, parts of Isaiah, many Psalms, and extensive portions of the New Testament all show signs of Enochic influence. Perhaps most significantly, scholars now recognize that the entire concept of apocalyptic literature in Judaism and Christianity, the genre that includes Daniel, Revelation, and numerous other texts, essentially began with the Book of Enoch. The detailed descriptions of end-times events, cosmic battles, and divine judgment that define apocalyptic literature all trace back to innovations first found in Enochic writings. The archaeological discoveries of the 20th century have only strengthened Enoch's credibility. The Dead Sea Scrolls, discovered beginning in 1947, contained more fragments of the Book of Enoch than any other non-biblical text except Psalms. This evidence proves that Enochic literature was not only widely read, but considered authoritative by Jewish communities during the time of Jesus. Modern UFO researchers and ancient astronaut theorists have seized upon the Book of Enoch as potential evidence of extraterrestrial contact in ancient times. The detailed descriptions of the Watchers' descent from heaven, their advanced technological knowledge, and their interactions with humanity bear striking resemblances to modern UFO encounter narratives. While mainstream academia remains skeptical of such interpretations, the parallels are undeniable. Enoch's descriptions of flying through the heavens, witnessing advanced technologies, and receiving cosmic knowledge from non-human intelligences read remarkably like contemporary abduction accounts. The book's revival has also influenced modern religious movements. Some contemporary Christian groups have begun incorporating Enochic teachings into their theology, arguing that the early church's censorship was a mistake that deprived believers of important spiritual truths. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church, which preserved the complete text through centuries of suppression, now finds itself in the unique position of having maintained what many scholars consider essential background material for understanding both the Old and New Testaments. New translations and scholarly editions continue to appear, each offering fresh insights into the text's meaning and significance. Digital humanities projects are using computational analysis to trace Enochic influences throughout ancient literature with unprecedented precision. Today, the Book of Enoch stands as one of the most controversial texts in religious studies. Its rediscovery has opened questions that many religious authorities hoped would remain permanently closed, and its implications continue to challenge traditional understanding of biblical history and theological development. The Book of Enoch's relevance extends far beyond academic curiosity. It addresses fundamental questions about the nature of evil, the reality of spiritual warfare, and the possibility of direct divine revelation that remain as controversial today as they were 17 centuries ago when church authorities first moved to suppress the text. In our contemporary world, where religious authority is increasingly questioned and spiritual seeking takes many forms, Enoch's claims about receiving direct revelation from divine sources resonates with millions of people who feel disconnected from institutional religion. The text's detailed descriptions of cosmic reality, angelic hierarchies, and spiritual warfare speak to believers who find traditional theological explanations inadequate for understanding the complexities of modern evil and suffering. The book's influence on conspiracy theories and alternative spirituality movements cannot be ignored. Enochic themes about hidden knowledge, supernatural beings manipulating human affairs, and cosmic battles between good and evil provide framework for numerous contemporary belief systems that operate outside mainstream religious institutions. From a scholarly perspective, the Book of Enoch has revolutionized our understanding of Second Temple Judaism and early Christianity. It's now impossible to fully comprehend the religious and cultural context of the New Testament without understanding the Enochic tradition that clearly influenced its authors. Seminary curricula and biblical studies programs increasingly recognize this reality, despite resistance from some denominational authorities. The text also raises uncomfortable questions about the process of canon formation. If the Book of Enoch was widely accepted in ancient Jewish and early Christian communities, if it influenced biblical authors, and if it provides crucial context for understanding Scripture, what does its exclusion tell us about the decisions made by early church authorities? Were these decisions guided by theological considerations, political expediency, or concerns about institutional control? Modern religious pluralism has created space for reconsidering texts that were previously dismissed or suppressed. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church's continued inclusion of Enoch in their biblical canon provides a living example of how different Christian traditions can legitimately hold varying views about which texts constitute authoritative scripture. The book's detailed engagement with cosmic and astronomical themes also speaks to contemporary interests in the intersection of science and spirituality. Enoch's sophisticated understanding of celestial mechanics and calendar systems demonstrates that ancient religious traditions were far more scientifically informed than previously recognized. Perhaps most significantly, the Book of Enoch challenges the comfortable assumption that we fully understand the historical development of biblical religion. The text reveals that ancient Judaism and early Christianity were far more diverse, mystical, and cosmically oriented than traditional denominational histories acknowledge. The ongoing publication of new scholarly editions, translations, and commentaries on the Book of Enoch demonstrates continued academic interest in understanding its historical and theological significance. Each new discovery of ancient manuscripts or archaeological evidence provides additional context for understanding how this text functioned in ancient religious communities. As we conclude our investigation into this most mysterious of ancient texts, one question remains. In an age where religious authority is increasingly questioned and spiritual truth is sought through many channels, does the Book of Enoch represent dangerous forbidden knowledge that was rightfully suppressed? or essential spiritual wisdom that religious authorities feared would undermine their institutional control. The story of the Book of Enoch is ultimately a story about power, authority, and the control of sacred narrative. For over 1,000 years, religious institutions successfully suppressed a text that was once considered as authoritative as Genesis or Isaiah. The fact that this suppression was possible reveals just how much influence institutional authorities wielded over the development of religious tradition. But the story is also about the persistence of truth and the impossibility of permanently burying ideas that resonate with human spiritual experience. Despite systematic censorship, Enochic themes survived in mystical traditions, influenced magical practices, and shaped religious imagination across multiple cultures and centuries. The rediscovery of the complete text in the modern era has vindicated ancient believers who found spiritual truth in Enoch's visions. Archaeological evidence from Qumran and other sites proves that these were not fringe beliefs, but mainstream elements of ancient Jewish and early Christian spirituality. Today, readers can judge for themselves whether the Book of Enoch represents dangerous heretical speculation or profound spiritual insight. The text is freely available in multiple translations, extensively studied by scholars, and accessible to anyone curious about the hidden history of biblical literature. What cannot be disputed is that the Book of Enoch provides crucial context for understanding the religious world that produced both Judaism and Christianity as we know them today. The systematic exclusion of this context from mainstream religious education has created a gap in spiritual understanding that is only now being recognized and addressed. The censorship of the Book of Enoch also raises broader questions about religious authority and the development of Orthodox belief. How many other texts, traditions, and perspectives were systematically suppressed in the process of creating unified religious institutions? What other forbidden knowledge might enhance rather than threaten authentic spiritual understanding? Perhaps most importantly, the Book of Enoch challenges readers to think more critically about the sources of spiritual authority. If early church leaders could make mistakes about which texts deserved inclusion in Scripture, and mounting evidence suggests they did, what other assumptions about religious truth might deserve re-examination? The Book of Enoch stands as a testament to both the power of institutional censorship and the ultimate futility of trying to suppress ideas that speak to fundamental human spiritual concerns. After 17 centuries of suppression, the text has not only survived but continues to influence religious thought and challenge orthodox assumptions about biblical history. Whether you view the Book of Enoch as inspired scripture, valuable historical document, or fascinating ancient mythology, its story reveals how much religious authorities have feared certain kinds of spiritual knowledge, and how that fear has shaped the development of traditional religious institutions. In an age of renewed spiritual seeking and questioning of traditional authorities, the Book of Enoch offers both insight into ancient spiritual wisdom and a cautionary tale about the dangers of allowing any institution to control access to spiritual truth.